Okay, hi there. I am now returning to the analysis of the transmission that came forward in response to the questions that I asked regarding a social media post. The social media post was, whilst you now enter the most challenging times for your planet, you also enter the most connected times. This connection can be perceived as dystopian or utopian, depending on vantage point, memory system, awareness, and action taken on the physical level. So this was something that came through from the 9, which I presented on social media. I had lots of people asking to clarify further on this post. So I asked the 9 if they could do this, if they could clarify further. And if you go back to the previous video, the Into the Photon Belt, that contains within it the response from the 9 to the clarification of that tweet. And then after I asked the 9 some questions, and the response to the questions is also in the previous video, the Kali Yuga, Into the Photon Belt. So I'm just going to finish the analysis of this and then move into the analysis of what came in response to the further questions as well. So the next part to look at is where the 9 say, this is the manifestation of your polarity at this time whilst in the photon belt, and this is the event that you are also focused upon. So this is the manifestation of your polarity. What they're talking to there, what they're responding to, is the previous part of the transmission. Yet if you remember the fall of Atlantis as the magical act and the power of the crystal force, then you will power up into your own empowerment and realize that you are the priest wizard who holds and wields the magic wand. The Photon Belt Celestial Bridge will be a blank canvas playground of abundant creativity, and thus the greatest gift one can receive in human incarnate form, human incarnate experience. This is looking at the fall of Atlantis as a magical act, as the power of the crystal force. So seeing the reality that we are in now as utopian, or the reality where we are going, and the fact that we are in the photon belt, the multidimensional experience that we are living within now, seeing that as utopian rather than dystopian. This is just a presentation of polarity. You don't have to see it as total dystopia or total utopia. You can see our reality now as somewhere within those two polarities, within a balance. And the whole photon belt energy is one of neutrality, because it is pre-incarnate fabric. It's fabric that is molded to create our reality as a collective consciousness on this planet. So that's a 0 point field, which is a place of neutrality. So you can draw that into the polarity and look for balance. But the reason why the 9 give the polarity of utopia or dystopia is simply to show that you can look on the negative side or you can look on the positive side. That's what they mean. And also that where we are going, indeed, if we are in that flow of the divine spark, the divine flame, the divine higher connection, with that balance with the vertical axis, the pillar of light, and we are able to take that into our reality and remain in that space, that 5th dimensional consciousness and above, then we will have an experience that is utopia. And we will view that in our actual physical reality if we're in that space. And the dystopia that is viewed is something that we will see that's there, and we'll see other individuals experience this and manifest this, whereas we're sort of outside of that. We're taking a observer viewpoint to that. So that's why the 9 use dystopia and utopia as such extremes, as a presentation of choice. And that's what they mean with the next sentence. This is the manifestation of your polarity at this time, whilst in the photon belt. The manifestation is your choice, the free will to make the choice as to whether you move into utopia or a dystopia. And this is the event that you are also focused upon. So many of us in the light worker community, in the truth community, we tend to talk about the event. We know something is happening galactically, cosmically, and third dimensionally. We know there is an event or a series of events. We feel this. We've been sort of programmed, if you will, when we access those memories. We can understand that the memory that we're accessing is a knowing of what is coming. The memory is the code of the understanding of what is coming in the reality that we incarnated into, as it's all connected with our divine mission and the reason why we're here. So we know about the event. So the 9 is saying this is the manifestation of your polarity at this time whilst in the photon belt. You manifest the polarity you wish to experience. You move into positive or negative, utopia or dystopia. And that's the event you're also focused upon. So it may be a flash of light. It may be a complete splitting of realities that's very, very evident. A shift upon the earth where you have two Genesis experiences, two new realities being formed at the same time, and you choose one or the other. That is the manifestation of that polarity. That's the event. The event is the manifestation of polarity. And then I've spoken about this further to talk about this being an event horizon. That's what they call it, an event horizon, which is an infinity boundary, as in the end of a cycle, the boundary of that cycle and the beginning of a new one. We cross that event horizon because we cross a boundary that can't be crossed because the boundary doesn't exist in the actual presentation of an infinity structure, because an infinity structure is infinite. It just goes on and on and on forever. It doesn't have a boundary. The event horizon is the boundary that allows us to make sense of that infinity by giving it some kind of balance or structure that we can measure. So that event horizon, that's what this event is. It is a crossing of a boundary from the end of something into the beginning of something, which is another perspective of explaining this photon belt presentation. It's just another model to explain the same thing. So the 9 go on to say regarding the event, this event is not happening to you, you are in it. So it's not something that we're waiting for and it's about to happen and we view it and experience it by seeing it happen. We are actually in it. We're in the event. The event is all around us. We are submerged within it. It surrounds you. So the polarity is therefore not an environment that you have no control over, that you are a passive bystander within. The polarity is of your making, and the wizard's magic wand you wield is your activated self. So what the 9 are saying here is, rather than standing and looking at an environment where things are happening, a flash of light, this split in consciousness, and in geology, and these changes that are occurring, these shifts that are occurring, that we simply observe as a passive bystander thinking, goodness me, look what's happening to reality, look what's happening on the third dimension, look what's happening in the government, look what's happening, look what's happening to humanity, look what's happening in these countries, look what's happening galactically, look what's happening in the cosmos. We're an observer, we're an innocent bystander, and it's all happening to us, and we're sort of helpless in it, passive in it, as in, this is happening around me, I have no control over it. That's not the perspective the 9 are saying that we have. That's not the truth of this experience, especially if you are in that sovereignty, in that integral self, standing within the boundary of your own event horizon, the understanding of your own infinity. as a sovereign structure within that pillar of light, within that anchor, if you are in that place, then you are the environment. You are at one with that environment. You're at one with everything that's occurring on the physical level, the galactic level, the cosmic level. It's all around us because we're submerged within it, not consumed by it, but unified with it. So you are not a passive bystander within. The polarity is of your making. So you create the polarity yourself, and the wizard's magic wand, so you are the wizard, you hold the magic wand. The wizard's magic wand you wield, because you are creating your magic, is your activated self. That's how come you have the magic wand and how come you are the wizard. So if you're not in that polarity, that balanced polarity, the focus upon the choice utopia, or the balance within that, or however you wish to experience paradise or the Garden of Eden, you're in that focus, you're in that awareness, you have that enlightenment, that sovereignty, you are standing within that integral self, understanding the boundary of your own infinity structure, completely connected with source consciousness. That makes you the wizard and gives you the magic wand. That is the magic wand and the magic that's coming from it. It's your activated self. So it's you activated, as in you know who you are. You know that you're an activated self. You know you're in that connection and that you're one with source. You are unified with all things. If you are not in that place, if you're in the third dimension, in that passive bystander position, seeing everything as happening to you and you being helpless with it and to it, then you are not the wizard. You do not hold the magic wand with the magic, and you do not wield that magic wand, because the magic wand is your activated self, and you don't have an activated self. You have the non-activated self. You have the deactivated self, still in a state of deactivation, which is something that on one level is a choice. On another level, these particles I spoke about in the last video are beaming down upon us onto the planet and raising within us from our DNA, always shining that photonic light within our energy system and shining that photonic light on the shadow and on the memory system. So every single individual on this planet is continually bathed in that photonic light, giving them the opportunity and the chance to become the activated self. Everyone, no one is left behind from that perspective. Someone may be left behind from the perspective of the planetary ascension and galactic ascension taking place and them not being part of that. But no one is left behind when it comes to opportunity and comes to chance. Chance is given because that photonic light is delivered everywhere. It raises up through the body and it's beamed down onto the planet in these forms of magnetic matching particles that occur within that quantum DNA and within that galactic field coming in from the core of the galaxy, the Photon Belt experience. So everyone has the chance to become the activated self, become the wizard, hold the magic wand and wield that magic wand. And the magic wand creates, it's a Genesis code, it's a Genesis program. So it creates realities. Do you want utopia? Do you want dystopia? The issue here is that whilst we can do this alone within our own immediate environment, we can do this collectively as a huge group. So for our own immediate environment, we manifest our reality. We manifest love and abundance and connection and health and experience and spiritual awakening and all of those things for our individual reality that we perceive. But when we work together in this huge group of others that are like us, that's when we work planetarily, cosmically and galactically, because we're able to radiate that magic from the magic wand, if you will. We're able to wield many magic wands at once, or one large, super powerful magic wand that we all have access to, whichever metaphor you want to use. So the polarity is of your making, and the wizard's magic wand you wield is your activated self. Sword of truth, vertical axis, or full wheel matrix configuration. So I spoke earlier, sword of truth, this is the alignment, the vertical pillar of light that gives you the alignment, that gives you the sovereignty, the strength. It is the foundation for the true self, and it's the sword of truth because it stands upright as the vertical pillar, just as the sword. And the vertical pillar is as a cross because you have the horizontal axis moving through the vertical pillar. That is the sacred cross. And when you hold the sword, you have that cross at the hilt of the sword. And that's Excalibur. That's the Excalibur Codex, which all starseeds activate when they come into that balance, when they move into that neutrality, yet keeping their eye on the focus, on the prize of the utopia, paradise, Eden, which is the ascension timeline, which is the positively polarized experience. So that's the sword of truth, vertical axis, or full wheel matrix configuration. So that's when you come into the fullness of the infinity structure and you understand it from a architectural point of view. So you have that vertical pillar, you have that sword, you have that horizontal axis, which is your sacred cross. You then have the diagonal axis coming through, which are your generational lines, your pre-incarnate lines, your genetic lines from the ancestors and the descendants. So you have the understanding of time in a way that affects you, and in a way that links you with all your ancestors, all your descendants, and all your past lives and your future lives. So you start to see time in a completely different way. And then you would focus upon that as a wheel with a boundary around it, that boundary being the event horizon. And that is the boundary that gives you the structure that is an infinite structure, and you mirror source consciousness, even though you are fully aware that each axis within that structure is infinite, goes on and on and on forever, and there is no boundary. You still hold the boundary because you understand the infinite structure in an architectural sense. And that's actually a toroidal field, and it has elements of the flower of life, and all of the geometric construction from the inception point of the soul right through to the experience of the human and the experience of the multiple humans that soul experiences. All of that is held within that matrix field, which is why the 9 say, or full wheel matrix configuration, because it's a wheel, but it's also a matrix. So that is the activated self. The sword of truth, vertical axis, or full wheel matrix configuration is the activated self. That's how you find, or it is one method, one model. There are multiple models of finding sovereignty and moving into the integral aspect, the integral self, holding integrity. There are many, many ways to do that, but this is the model the 9 teach. And when you have that, you have your activated self. That makes you the wizard. And you hold the magic wand because you have the vertical pillar, which is the sword with the hilt. The magic wand is the sword. The wizard holds the magic wand, and the knight of the round table, if you will, holds the sword of Excalibur. They are the same thing, different metaphoric presentations of the same energy, as in you have achieved a presentation of the royal code or of mastery. You are royal, you are a master, you are ascended. That's what it means, even though you haven't ascended yet from the human perspective. In incarnation, you understand that when you take that integral self, that wheel matrix configuration, and understand the sword of truth, then you know that that is an ascended point, and you can perceive and operate from that ascended point. That is your activated self. It's self-actualization, full self-actualization. You can move into that at any point. You may not have taken that full actualization forward in its fullest sense. And the reason why you haven't done that is because you are in alignment with the planet and with the collective consciousness of humanity. You go together when you see it from that perspective. But when you move into the perspective of self, as in the positively polarized self, self that merges with other but sees itself fully as unified with all things and source consciousness, when you take that perspective, then you have that ascended master state. So you need to see the multiple dimensional perspectives in order to understand what an ascended master is and what it means to be an ascended master, and whether you should present yourself as an ascended master or not. You are given information about that when you take this activated self, full self-actualization point within that wheel matrix configuration. That's the integral self, integrity, and sovereignty. When you take that, you make the decisions based on what's occurring in your life in that moment and who you're communicating with, as to whether you take that stance actively or whether you just take it in a silent knowing through humility. It's absolutely your choice to do that, and you can change hats, if you will. You can move into different states of disguise as you present your true self in the world. Is it safe to be your true self in this environment? It may not be. You then take the cloak of invisibility, the purple cloak of invisibility, and you allow that cloak to shield you because you don't wish to step out in that environment. But in another environment, it's not only safe, it's required for you to step forward into the mastery of self. So all of these knowings come to you when you take that wheel matrix configuration of activated self and wield the wizard's magic wand. That gives you the opportunity and the chances to create the polarity you want from your own choice, from your own free will. And then I go on to say the polarity is your choice, for the environment itself molds itself to you and bends to your will. So when you take that integral stance within the knowing of the fully realized self, the sovereignty and the knowing of that, and you take it architecturally in whichever way you use that architecture, the polarity is always your choice, for the environment molds itself to you and everything that you are, and it bends to your will. That's why you wield the magic wand. So this is, I guess, the law of magnetic attraction in its advanced presentation, I would say. This is a law of magnetic attraction teaching, or it is law of magnetic attraction wisdom, or it's law of magnetic attraction catalyst or key for you to take as the understanding of that in its fullness, rather than just, oh, I think of something that I want and I imagine that I've got it, and then there it is. The true teaching, the true wisdom is simply the fabric of the galactic reality and the fabric of the antimatter that connects with the matter. It's a law. It is a universal pulse. It's more than a law. It simply is. And you can sort of take the perspective in multiple ways and present it to others in all these multiple different formats and different teachings, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it simply is as it is. It's the way the universe works. And when you understand that, you merge with that, because you are it. You are it. So that's why it bends to your will. But it isn't done in a demanding way. It isn't done in a controlling power way. It can be, That's what the service to self factions do. They control the elements and intend for them to bend to their will. But because they are moving into a polarity that isn't natural, they would then have to do the same thing to balance it and bend to its will. And that's why they raise a lower fourth dimensional consciousness when they do that, because you can't do that with higher dimensional consciousness. A unified field of fifth dimensional energy and above doesn't bend to your will, and you don't bend to its will. That simply is part of that magnetic. It bends to your will simply because it's being molded by who and what you are, because you are part of it and you live in unification with it. It's completely different, but very similar when you look at the two different pathways of service to self or service to others. So this is the law of magnetic attraction in its fullest expression, for it is pure magnetism. So if you think of a magnet and how a magnet attracts, that's what this energy is. It's magnetism, but really it's attraction or magnetic attraction. It's all the same thing. It's like attracts like in a unified sense. So the polarity of magnetism is a unified field. The polarity is within the unity. It's simply unity, but it's polarized because it's magnetic, because you can't have a magnet without attracting one thing to another. So that is the twin flame, if you will, the twin flame of reality that is superimposed with or merged with or exists within the eternal flame. So that's another way of looking at that magnetism of the galactic fabric, the twin flame within the eternal flame, as in it's a unified field, but it has pure potential for polarity at all times, because polarity and duality creates the illusion, because it is an illusion. You can't really move out of unification, because that is the true source expression. There's nothing beyond that. It's an illusion that there is this magnetic choice or free will. So free will exists, but it's an illusion when you are aware of unity. And it's an illusion when you are aware of the control system. But when you understand the control system and its place and where it can operate, and you understand the unification of source, then you can understand that you do have free will and you absolutely claim it. That's when you take liberty, the liberty codes, and they come with the sovereignty and the activation of the activated self, the full actualization. It's all one package. It comes together within that infinite expression, that infinite sphere within that event horizon boundary. So this is the law of magnetic attraction in its fullest expression, for it is pure magnetism. This is the fabric of the photon belt. So self-explanatory. In the photon belt, which is where we are now, that's the fabric, magnetism, that aligns with you and your will and your consciousness, or our consciousness, as we together, as a collective consciousness of awakened individuals who take that activation. So you have multiple individuals living in physical form, incarnated on this planet, who hold this activated self, wheel matrix configuration, sword of truth, vertical axis. When those individuals work together, that's when you create worlds and galaxies, because they're working together as one mind in this extremely connected telepathy. That's what's happening. That's why we're moving towards this diamond core convergence. That's why it's an inevitability, because of the starseed connection and the telepathy, or the truth community's awareness, or the open heart, indigo, crystal, all of those things. Everything you're hearing in the truth community and in the spiritual light worker communities, they're all metaphors of this. They're all metaphors for this. That's the manifestation of this inevitability. which is a diamond core convergence, paradise, Eden, a sovereign, free state of liberty for this planet. That's what all this is about. All of these wisdoms and teachings and readings, wherever you may find that information, it's all saying the same thing, all teaching of this huge event which is surrounding you, that you are immersed within, that you are part of. This is the fabric of the Photon Belt, celestial bridge. You are the one who makes the choice. So you are the one. You choose which polarity field you want to experience, and you take that choice from the core of that integral sovereign aspect, which is that activated self. That's where you make the choice. You are the one who makes the choice. It is only you, and can ever only be you. And the reason why the nines say that at the end is because from the higher perspective, there is only one soul living out multiple experience. When you look at it from that perspective, there is only you. You are the only soul. Every other soul is you. They're just living out a different reality in a different time period, in a different dimension. Everything that you see that has life force is you. Everything you see that doesn't have life force as we would perceive it in an organic sense is you. That's why the nine end on that. And we are the white-winged collective consciousness of nine. So they end that transmission. And I then went on to ask some questions. And the responses in the previous video, the Into the Photon Belt, Manifesting Paradise is the little video inside that presentation. And so when that came forward, the Manifesting Paradise is the response to these questions. But the questions I asked in response to the Into the Photon Belt transmission, which I've just gone through as an analysis. So the questions I asked, firstly, are you saying that the service to self factions cannot possibly manifest an iron core convergence? That it will definitely be the diamond core? The silver core you mentioned that could be a potential for them, as in the service to self factions, that you said would be a fourth dimensional domain. Can you speak more about this? And is this in any way dependent on the US election? I asked that question because I have always seen the US election, and not always, it's just been since, not the last election, the election before. I saw the result of the election creating a timeline. And I saw the same thing again with the last election. As in, everything changes depending on who gets the American presidency position. So I wanted to know if this this silver core, which they're saying is this branching off from this diamond core converged reality that is a higher version of the iron core. Is this dependent on the US election? As in, will the US election change the timeline? I also asked, can you tell me what's likely to occur geologically on our planet when we manifest the full diamond core convergence? So I will now go through the nine's responses. As I said, their responses are in the previous video, in the inserted transmission that's in that video that's called Manifesting Paradise, but I will go through this as an analysis now. It is not possible for the service to self factions to manifest an iron core convergence within Earth's current trajectory. Now, in the first response, they were saying that it's possible. So I'll go back to that piece, because this is what made me sort of question further. So if I go right back to the beginning of that first response, it's saying, the nine say here, whilst in this space, as in the photon belt, it is possible for a re-emergence of a new iron core multi-density vortex to be manifested if that contained a higher polarity field. Therefore, harmony would be experienced as control, and intelligence, wisdom, knowing would be experienced as technological advancement. So they were saying it is possible for a re-emergence of a new iron core. But the highest probability is a full diamond core multi-density vortex. But when I asked the question, their response was, it is not possible for the service to self factions to manifest an iron core convergence within Earth's current trajectory. Now, I thought that that was two different things. That was an inconsistency. However, the Nine have said it's not possible for the service to self factions to manifest an iron core convergence within Earth's current trajectory, as in where we are headed for now, as in what we are headed for today, beginning of September 2020, where we are headed for as of now, the trajectory from now, it's not possible. So as long as we stay on this alignment, this trajectory, it's not possible for them to manifest that. The only way they could experience an iron core convergence would be to reincarnate back into an alternative iron core convergence. So that would mean they would reincarnate, they would leave this body and reincarnate back into an alternative iron core convergence, which wouldn't be this trajectory. So it would either be another third dimensional planet, or it would be Earth that has gone through a different timeline, a different experience. Earth that's not where we are, because there are multiple outcomes for Earth. However, they would need to fully polarize within the negative polarity in order to be able to achieve this. So if they can fully polarize as a negative, which is very, very difficult, very, very challenging, if they can fully polarize as negative in the way that we, I'm talking about this matrix, we fully polarize within the positive, as in with self-realization, they would polarize in self-realization within the God complex. They would polarize as a master, but not in the same way, not an ascended master in the sense of a master in service because they are in unconditional love for all. It would be a master who stands only as self and doesn't recognize other than as a source to power their own self. If they can polarize fully in that, then they could reincarnate back into an alternate timeline for Earth or another third dimensional planet, which potentially may be the same thing as an alternate Earth. It is, but it would look very, very different. So you can have other third dimensional planets that are Earth, but they would be called different things because they're completely different. But everything is Earth from the third dimensional point of view. Even though there are multiple third dimensional planets, they're all Earths in different timelines. Every planet is another timeline, another dimension. Every single planet that we see, when we see planets in the solar system, in the sky, they are other dimensions. So, but that's a whole other topic. So they would need to fully polarize within the negative polarity in order to be able to achieve this. Even then, so even if they do manage to fully polarize, which is so difficult for them, even then the probability is low that they would be able to do this. So it's possible, but low even if they can polarize. And I can tell you now, looking at the deep state, none of them have polarized negative. None of them. I mean, there might be one person that could do it. His first name is George. Possibly. He hasn't yet, but he's probably the only one that's on the path to. The others, they're absolutely nowhere near. They're just nowhere near full negative polarization, as bad as you may think they are. But the one called George, it's possible. So at the moment, this is not looking likely for them at all. But the nine are giving us, are showing us how they would achieve this. And they show us, the nine show us this so that we can see how easy it is for us, even though we are working really hard and we have work to do, how we are on the trajectory for that inevitability of the Great Awakening and the Diamond Core and the Paradise Template, because they can't access all these other things because it's just such a low probability for them. So even then, the probability is low that they would be able to do this due to the karmic ties they have created with Earth's current trajectory. So when they reincarnate, they will try through death to birth conscious transfer, and they would need to be polarized in a high negative place to be able to do this and have spiritual understanding. And no one in the deep state has got this. They're all answering to other individuals that we don't see. These individuals are not the deep state. They are, you know, the higher echelons, the deeper echelons, the deep state. You know, they're way behind the deep state. They all the deep state answer to these individuals and are taught by them, or they just do as they're told and they follow orders. Some of them don't even know why they're following the orders. They just know that they have to. They've been programmed that way since birth. So even then, the probability is low that they would be able to do this due to the karmic ties they've created with Earth's current trajectory. So what they've done within the actions that they have taken, they've created karma that's lining up with our trajectory. So they would try to reincarnate using death to birth conscious transfer, if they're able to do that, try to project themselves into this alternate field back into an iron core convergence. But the likelihood is, because of the karmic ties, they would just come back into Earth's future. They would reincarnate or present, depending on when they pass from this body and reincarnate into the next one. But they're in the reincarnational wheel, that's for sure. On a service to self level, you can't move away from that. You have to be reincarnating. Unless you polarize fully service to self, then you have more options depending on how things have gone for you in your existence, in your reality. The most probable outcome for them would be to live in service within Earth's current trajectory. So they would reincarnate back into Earth's future on the same trajectory that we're on now, and be given an opportunity to live in service. They would be given opportunities to transmutate into a higher polarity. So they would be given the chance, the opportunity to become service to others. They would be given the opportunity to transmute out of service to self and move into service to others. That would be a big jump for them, because they will have reincarnated in this negative polarity and reincarnate back in with that desire. But they'll be given the opportunity because of the trajectory, because the trajectory for Earth is of compassion and forgiveness. So any dark soul, any negative soul that's reincarnated will be welcomed as a soul into Earth's future and be given the opportunity to amend their ways, if you will, because of the energy of forgiveness and compassion. It's like no soul is shoved to one side regardless of what they did in their previous life or current life. All shall be forgiven in that fifth dimensional consciousness. which is a real tough one, I know, for people to get their head around. They don't want to move into forgiveness. They've no intention of moving into forgiveness when they're in the place of understanding the atrocities and the crimes against humanity that have taken place. And I understand that. But the future, the diamond core is pulsating with compassion and forgiveness. It's in the frequency, and that emanates out into the entire infinite field that this dimension is. Otherwise, this wouldn't be a dimension of unconditional love, and this wouldn't be a fifth dimensional experience, a fifth dimensional reality. So they'll be given opportunities to transmutate into a higher polarity, which is a most difficult path for them due to their resistance to the positive polarity. So what the nine are saying here is that will be extremely challenging because they have resistance to the positive, and they'll be born with that if they use death to birth conscious transfer and try to reincarnate into an alternate iron core convergence, into an alternate Earth or other third dimensional planet. But they will end up, the higher probability is they will end up in Earth's future, be given a chance to change their ways, and they'll be in resistance to it. So the nine go on to say, or for them to reincarnate into another third density planet, which would be a even further Earth, a planet like Earth, even further away from our trajectory, because the nine are referring to this as another third density planet. So we would think of that as not Earth, and it wouldn't be called Earth either, because in the term of, in the perspective of space, it would be a completely different planet to Earth. It would be light years away, but it would be an Earth-like planet. In the perspective of time, it would be Earth, but very far away from the timeline. So timelines and trajectories and other planets in space are all the same thing. When you look at that matrix, all the other Earths are along the horizontal axis, which is a quantum reality field. And all the future Earths, the future trajectory, is along that forward moving horizontal axis and the higher moving horizontal axis. So it goes upwards and forwards. But the other planets would go sideways into the quantum. So from a space point of view, they would be another planet light years away that have Earth type environment. And you know, if you were to go out into a spaceship that had the capabilities to traverse space, you would find that planet in its physical form. But from the perspective of time, it's actually another Earth. I hope that's explained that. And it's important to explain that, because then you'll understand the terminology the nine use to explain what they're saying. So, or for them to reincarnate into another third density planet that holds a silver core. So this is not an iron core convergence. This is higher than an iron core convergence. This is would be a reality where the feminine is dominant, but not in a balanced way. So you wouldn't be seeing divine feminine. You'd be seeing God complex, highly controlling feminine as a distortion with an emasculated masculine. That's what you'd see as a predominant energy in that field, because they would be learning about gender balance, because gender's been so distorted within the iron core convergence that the higher polarity is a silver core. They'd have to balance that and learn about gender balance. Or the other alternative is a hybrid iron silver core or similar vibrational element. So what that means is you would have, it wouldn't be a full iron core, but it would be an iron and silver core as one, or a similar vibrational element. And the reason why the nine have said that is there are other elements that we don't have names for. They can't tell me what the name is of these. They're using metals as or metals, rocks, crystals, but with the lower frequency emotion, the lower frequency vibration and experience, they use metal as a you know, as a metaphor to explain this. And as they've said, it isn't a metaphor. If you actually look under the microscope, you will see elements that match the periodic table chemical equation of iron. So a hybrid iron silver core. So this would be, it would be similar to what we have here, or sorry, what we did have in our past, but not as bad, because you've got the silver element. So you're still going to have, they wouldn't be able to repress the feminine, because the feminine would be in control. So you'd have a planet where you'd probably, that would probably manifest as gender wars, because the male wouldn't be emasculated because of the silver core empowerment of this God complex controlling female, because the iron core is a masculine presentation. So you'd have gender wars in that sort of planet, in that reality. Then the 9 go on to say this is a subject outside the scope of this current series of transmissions, but I can understand that, because they're going into different core points in different trajectories, different convergences. So we are talking about convergences of timelines that is so complex, and you haven't just got one planet in that convergence, you've got multiple, infinite planets, because a convergence is infinite infinities converged together, infinite timelines, infinite timelines superimposed on top of one another. Within that, you've got multiple galaxies, multiple universes, multiverses, and multiple planets of all different kinds. So for me to explain my example of gender wars is just one example. It could work completely the other way on a different planet, where there's emasculated female and male, or there could be some kind of androgyny going on in early stages that would still be in a polarity, but not in the way we experience or have experienced it here. I mean, everything you can imagine exists in some of these converged fields. So the 9 said this is a subject outside of the scope of this current series of transmissions, but we can return to such at a future point. So it's something that is interesting, and it's certainly a catalyst to expansion, because if you can get your head around all these different expressions of reality, you realize just how vast creation actually is, and where we stand within that on this planet and within this timeline. So it's very interesting. It's very catalyzing for your expansion. But the 9 are bringing their focus into a certain point specific to this reality, this trajectory, what's going on this planet, and how to assist the starseeds to hold the 5th dimensional frequency and keep that trajectory for the diamond core on track as it is now. That's the predominant teaching. And so all of the other informations is kind of branching off into deep quantum physics and philosophy, but we can return to such at a future point, they said. So yes, the inevitability is that of a diamond core convergence of timelines, or what we call a multi-density vortex. So the highest probability, and this is a high probability, that's why it's such a high probability that it presents as an inevitability. So that's the trajectory we are on. However, there are smaller cores that branch off from the full central core. So the core of the convergence of timelines is a diamond core, which emanates from it this compassion, this love, forgiveness, gratitude, sovereignty, freedom, and empowerment, love, paradise, Garden of Eden reality, harmonious reality, with unconditional love and compassion blended together at the core, everything that you could see that is diamond light. So as this emanates through all these timelines and this convergence of timelines in small sections, not very much, the 9 showed me the picture of this. And if you imagine a spider's web, a huge spider's web, and the very center of the spider's web, instead of there being a spider, there's a diamond. And that diamond sends diamond shimmering light down every part of the spider's web, apart from a few tiny little pieces, not very much at all, that's silver, that have little tiny silver cores. Instead of a big diamond, there's a few tiny little silver cores. That's kind of what they showed me. So this is small compared to the vastness of the infinite structure. And it's certainly not, the silver cores are not infinite, they're finite. That's the difference. So there are smaller cores that branch off from the full central core, and a few of these, so some of these smaller cores, there's smaller cores branching off. So what you would see is all these intricate little parts of the spider's web, and only some of these, only a few of these, hold a below 50% probability, so below 50% probability of manifesting as silver cores. So the 9 don't work in absolutes. They don't say this is going to happen, this won't happen. This is happening now and this is not. They don't work like that. They teach me through probability. They teach me to understand and see probability, not absolutes and yeses and nos. That's why it's so complex. The teaching from the 9 is so complex, because it's all about probability. So a few of these hold a below 50% probability of manifesting a silver core. So there may be no silver cores. Within this diamond core, there may be no silver cores at all. So this is a full, positively polarized reality. This is a full Garden of Eden on every level. But there is a below 50% probability, which is, 50% is half and half. So there could be one or a few tiny silver core realities as mini timeline convergences, because a core is a timeline convergence. So again, this whole picture of what's available for the service to self factions, given that they have to polarize in the first place, what's available for them is not much. It's not nothing. I mean, it's not a case of there's nothing for the service to self groups. The positive polarization is all that there will be. No, there are these small potentials. There has to be some potential, given that they're doing manifestation work with the Photon Belt. But their work isn't enough to move beyond the power of the open-hearted starseeds that stand in balance and in sovereignty. So these little silver cores that are mini convergences of timelines, not the core of all the timelines itself, hold a below 50% probability of manifesting. Now, this is not what the service to self factions desire. They don't want that. They don't want to reincarnate into a silver core timeline reality that's part of the diamond core, because that's part of Earth's trajectory. They would see that as a consolation prize. And because they work with service to self energy, which is control and focus and power, they wouldn't want the consolation prize. They would want the goal. They can't have the goal, however. It's not going to happen for them. So everything they get is actually a consolation prize, if you will. That's how they would see it. In effect, it's not a consolation prize. It's no prize at all. It's a karmic balance to what they've put out, because they don't understand fully about the manifestation techniques that they're using. Even if they do, even if the highest, most powerful spiritual being amongst them understands, they still can't do anything about it, because of the inevitability and the fact that we are in the Photon Belt and that this is the end of multiple cycles. It can't be stopped. You can only distort nature to a point, and they've tried so hard to distort nature on every level on the physical, changing anything that's natural, gender, love, joy, happiness, bliss, relationships, coming together, food, nourishment, everything that the human needs to survive has been distorted. And still the human race thrive amongst this. Still there are those who are in an an ascended state and on that path to ascension. Still there are spiritual leaders out there delivering teachings and wisdom codes for compassion and love and service to others, the positive polarization. They've tried to stop that and it hasn't worked. So they are taking a consolation prize, but that's not good enough for them. They want as much as they can possibly get. They know they can't have the future. They know they can't have the future because it's not available, but they're trying to get as much as they possibly can. So the 9 went on to say the silver core projection. So if you imagine in this spider's web, you have this core point that's the diamond. And within this, you have these branches going off of this diamond filaments, diamond light, and then there's these tiny silver cores. So zoom in on a silver core, bring the silver core to a core point, because this is still a convergence of timelines. And we look at what the silver core is. The silver core projection, so we know the diamond core projection is love, unconditional love and unity and oneness and service to others. And we know the iron core is control and taking away of liberty and the few controlling the many, the new world order. It's a new world order timeline. It's actually the word that most fits that iron core is Armageddon. This is an Armageddon convergence of timelines, and the diamond core is a paradise. So we're looking at paradise and Armageddon. That's why it's such extreme polarity. The silver core would radiate out, and what it would be is a 4th dimensional domain. So if you imagine within the spider's web, there's only tiny little pieces of the spider's web that have manifested as silver. So if you look at the dimensions as like layers on top of one another, they only have a 4th dimensional domain for one silver core. Now a 4D domain, a 4th dimensional domain, is a reality, a full reality, but it's an illusory reality because the 4th dimension is the dimension of illusion. That's where the illusion matrix is held. It's not a source consciousness dimension as the 5th is and above. It's the emanation from the 3rd dimension, if you will. Everything on the 3rd dimension emanates upwards into the 4th, and everything in the 4th emanates down into the 3rd. It's like an echo reality, an echo dimension from the 3rd dimension. It's an echo of the 3rd. And that's the whole dimension. So a domain is just a piece, but a domain can be an illusory infinite structure. It's not infinite because the 4th dimension doesn't have that infinite ability in the same way as the 5th and the above. So everything in the 4th dimension is finite, which is why this whole thing is happening, because there's no infinity for the service to self factions to create. They've had their thousands and thousands of years, but they knew it was finite. They knew it was finite. It cannot be infinite if it's 4D. It has to be 5D and above to be infinite. So what they would have is a piece of the 4th dimension. And now it would be an illusory infinity structure. A real infinity structure just goes on and on and on and on because it's infinite. And it's powered up by the core, and it holds this event horizon. To create an illusory 4D domain, you would have to create a trap. It's a trapping system. Not all 4D domains are traps, however. You, as a astral traveler, you can create your own 4D domain. You can create a world, a land within the 4th dimension that's actually safe for you. But it wouldn't be a trap. It would be something, it would be a creation. It would be more of land with a boundary, but it isn't an infinite structure in the same way as 5D and above. So a 4D domain from a service to self-generated position would be a trapping system. And they had thousands of these set up. The whole religious doctrine were all 4D domains, which is all breaking down and changing. The silver core projection would be a fourth dimensional domain. A 4D domain is a reality that exists within the fourth dimension, but does not encompass all of the fourth dimension. So there's a reality. So if you were perhaps a Christian that followed Christian doctrine, and I'm just using that as one religion, without the activation of the heart, the true alignment to source, and that you actually followed doctrine and teaching in a intellectual way, worshipping a 4D entity that's presenting itself as a god, then you're caught in a 4D domain. When you pass over, that's the trapping system. So you would pass over, you would think that you were in a heaven-like reality, you would think that you'd met the Jesus Christ or God, but it's a false light structure. It is a trapping system. And the service to self had many of these trapping systems. That's how they caught the souls and then took them back down a descending fall system wormhole back into reincarnating into the iron core converged reality. That's how it's been for thousands of years. So this 4D domain is a reality that exists within the fourth dimension, but does not encompass all of it. So you can have your domain and within the 4D. Most ascended individuals, most individuals within that sovereignty and on the path to ascension, starseeds, will be creating fifth dimensional realities. And you can't really call them 5D domains because they're infinite structures within an infinity, So when you create a fifth dimensional structure, it encompasses all of the fifth dimension. And so does the structure that everyone else creates, because they all have infinities within the infinity, because there's no trap to it. It's a free system. So I hope that kind of explains the difference there, because that is a tough one to explain. So the 9 go on to say, for thousands and thousands of years, the service to self factions have held many, many 4D domains, which I explained about. This has been their power grid. So that's been the trapping system, their power grid. That's how they've powered up the inverted matrix within the entire third dimensional reality, was through these 4D domains, because they've created them to look as though they're real. They've created them as illusory constructs so that when individuals pass over as a soul, they think they're in the afterlife, but they've been caught in an illusion and they haven't been able to get beyond that and go into the true afterlife. This has been their power grid, and this is how they've controlled humanity for so long. Many of these inverted 4D domains, so yes, they're an inverted 4D domain because they're service to self-controlled. A 4D domain would be one that you created in your astral world. That's not inverted. That's been dreamweaved into reality by an astral traveler. Perhaps for someone who exists within 4D, an activated person who follows religion, perhaps the individuals who are in the pagan movement, who work with the white witchcraft, they would have many 4D domains, but these would be good domains. These would be good domains, and many of them would have multiple tiers with steps up into the fifth dimension as well, or tubes up into the fifth dimension where they can draw down 5D energy. So there's good domains, positive domains. 4D is not a horrible place. The fourth dimension is a beautiful, wonderful place, but it's been hijacked. So these 4D domains have been taken over, just like on Earth. You have these super states, which is what they wanted to create, which are physical manifestations of 4D domains, but they're not working. They're breaking up as they are in 4D. They are not there like they were anywhere near. This has been their power grid, and this is how they've controlled humanity for so long. Many of these inverted 4D domains have now been dismantled. So this is hugely important. They've been dismantled. So as you've got Donald Trump going around dismantling the actual homes and domains and structures in the third dimension, and the Trump administration are doing this, and other white hat individuals are breaking things down and draining the swamp and arresting the bad guys and all of that, This is happening in 4D. And it happens simultaneously. I mean, 3D beams upwards its energy into 4D and vice versa. But the 4D domains were worked on in a psychic sense, which is why this is a psychic battle. There have been grid workers on planet Earth for a long, long time. For many, many years, we've been working on dismantling this 4D trapping system through grid work. So they've been placing crystals within ley lines, within dragon lines, trajectories, working in sacred sites for many years. And that's dismantled these 4D domains. It's powered up crystalline energy into the 4D. So this has been going on for a long, long time. So many of these inverted 4D domains have now been dismantled, and those that exist are disintegrating. So they can't hold. Why? Because it's finite. It's a finite structure, and we, as a planet, as a dimension, as a dimensional structure, as a converged dimensional structure, we are in completion. And that's what this whole transmission has been about. We're in completion. Completion means coming to the end of and beginning again. It's a reboot. It's a reset. It's a dimensional reset. It's a dimensional reboot, and that filters down into the physical, and everything resets. So that fourth dimensional system is finite, and these 4D domains cannot sustain. They just cannot sustain. So this has been their power grid. This is how they've controlled humanity for so long. Many of these inverted 4D domains have now been dismantled, and those that exist are disintegrating and rebooting, if you will. So they are rebooting in a different form, in their new form, powered up by crystalline diamond frequency. So the diamond frequency from the trajectory is beaming out to us already here in this timeline, in this reality. So the reboot will hold the frequency of a diamond core. So the whole of the fourth dimension moves upwards into a higher 4D, or into 5D, if you will, and 5D moves up into 6, and 6 moves into 7th, if you want to see it that way. I mean, there are many models to explain, but this is a higher octave of 4D. The lower 4D is being dismantled because it can't sustain, it's finite. And that's where the majority of this illusory trapping system in these 4D domains are. In their new form, powered up by crystalline diamond frequency, for no iron core projected 4D domain can exist within a diamond core multi-density vortex. They can't exist within the diamond cores because the diamond is radiating compassion, forgiveness, love, unconditional love, bliss, utopia, ecstasy, euphoria, connection, unity. And these 4D domains from the iron core structure are not built on that. They're built on fear. And all of this love and forgiveness just dismantles them. That's what's happened. That's what's happening. I mean, it's wonderful when you can see what's happening. I know when you look at the third dimension, you just think, oh my gosh, this is just horrendous. It's just getting worse and worse. And, you know, I mean, on Monday here in the United Kingdom, we're back down to only having gatherings of 6 people when we're out and about or in our own house, except for going to work or on transport, or if you're in a school. Other than that, it's 6 people only. So, you know, it's like, it looks like we're going backwards. It's like we've become more and more open, and we've been able to do this and this and this, even though we've had masks, but we've been able to do these things, and now we're going backwards to 6 people and backwards into lockdown. That's what it looks like on the 3D. It really does. That's why it looks like a new world order, and this is the remnants of the iron core. But what does it really look like when you look behind that structure and you see the iron core and you see everything that I'm talking about? This is amazing. This is amazing. It really, really is. It really is. And we will see evidence of this in the physical. But it's going to take time because the remnants of the iron core old system have to dismantle. It's going to take time. Like it's taking time in the 4D, it has to take time in the 3D. but it's happening. It's happening. And I think, you know, I'm not the only channel, clairvoyant, psychic, intuitive that's saying this. I know I say it in a unique way that the nine teach me, but if you listen to other clairvoyant psychics and truthers and people who have been focused on this whole journey in multiple different ways, they are all saying the same thing, you know. So it is wonderful what's happening energetically, truly. So this has been their power grid. This is how they've controlled humanity for so long. Many of these inverted 4D domains have now been dismantled, and those that exist are disintegrating and rebooting, if you will, in their new form, powered up by crystalline diamond frequency. For no iron core projected 4D domain can exist within a diamond core multi-density vortex. The lowest frequency that can be broadcast from a diamond core is silver, which is the feminine force that overpowers the masculine. It is a distorted polarity when viewing it from a negatively polarized perspective. So if you see the silver core as a lower form of the diamond expression, as the lowest metal, if you will, that the diamond can actually get down to, it's nothing like the iron core. So it's a polarity, but it's a much higher polarity than this planet's experienced for thousands of years. It's a feminine force because it's the silver. The silver is the feminine, and it overpowers the masculine. So it may be, this is only when you're looking from a negatively polarized perspective, so a service to self perspective. The nine go on to say, however, the silver ray is the truly balanced divine feminine, which is an emanation from the diamond core template and exists fifth dimensionally. So the silver ray, the silver is the true feminine light. It is the moonlight, it is the subconscious, and it's in abundance throughout the fifth dimension. When it comes down into a 4D, which would be a 4D, a fourth dimensional expression, it's a distortion of that feminine as it's the lowest form of density that the diamond core can generate. Because diamond core is a high frequency. Now the nine go on to say, this is the same thing as saying your moon is becoming liberated from negative control. Yet this moves outside the boundaries of your quest, which indeed it does, as it's a whole other subject. But if someone were to say to you, the moon is becoming liberated from negative control, the moon has been controlled by the negative factions, negative ETs, service to self groups. They've controlled the moon as a means to control humanity through this distortion of the silver ray, if you will. But now it's becoming liberated. Or you could say that the moon was an artificial construct and it's now moving into an organic construct. It's become a walk-in because it's been in the solar system for so long. It's now holds planetary fabric and it's becoming conscious. Whichever way you want to look at it, it's the exact same thing as saying the silver ray is the truly balanced divine feminine, which is an emanation from the diamond core, and the silver core is the lowest frequency that can be broadcast from a diamond core. That's just another way of saying the moon is becoming liberated. But the nine don't go on to explain any more of that because it is a whole other subject and it's kind of moving outside of the boundaries of this, well, the boundaries of your quest, as in the question that I asked the nine. And the nine always stay within the boundaries of the question, even though it may seem like they're branching off into other areas. It's actually all a response to a question. They don't come in when a question hasn't been asked. They don't do that because that's outside of free will. I, as their conduit, have to hold the question and have formulated the question on some level, as anyone who's working with their guidance structure or higher self aspect will understand this. And it does seem like they come in and tell you things, but then when you think about it, you've actually been thinking about that on some level, or you've asked the question in some way. So you have to have come to the formulation of the question, which the nine call the quest. You are on a quest. when you want to discover something, you are on a quest. So they then go on to say, you ask if this silver core 4D domain creation is dependent on your US election. So I think I'll leave this video here. Leave you with that bit, because I know that that's an interesting bit, but it's quite involved. So I will leave this video here, and the next one I do will be about the response to the US election, the response to that question, which is in the first video, the last video I did, Manifesting Paradise. If you go into the Photon Belt Kali Yuga video, which is a 2-hour long talk, in that video there are 2 transmissions from the 9, and the second one is called Manifesting Abundance, and the response to this question is in there, and I will then go through the analysis of that in the next video. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back soon. Bye. What is karma? Are there ways we can balance this and become karma free? Is there a particular nutritional plan we should follow for ascension? Do we increase our karmic balance by eating certain foods? How can we utilize sex magic to work with karma and move through ascension? There are many lessons we can learn from the peoples of ancient Lemuria, a civilization that existed before our known history on planet Earth. As we move through an ascension process collectively, we move back into a new Lemuria, and we take with us all the knowledge we have accumulated since those times. In this transmission from the white-winged collective consciousness of 9, key codes are presented for cellular memory recall, linking the reader beyond Atlantis and into the harmonious frequencies of the first physical civilization on the Earth, Lemuria. The 9 respond to questions using the Lemurian way as a template. Key-coded responses trigger activations within the reader as they receive the wisdom codes, standing as rainbow warriors of Gaia, moving into abundance, alchemy, and Stargate ascension. This transmission is dear to my heart, and I'm so very pleased to announce my new book, Lessons from a Living Lemuria.